Have you ever wondered what you would do if you came face to face with the unexplainable? Imagine a night where the only light comes from an ancient lighthouse in the distance, and children's whispers blend with the sound of the waves. This is the story of the children of the lighthouse, a legend that has terrified the inhabitants of a remote coastal area for generations. Welcome to this new horror tale, where the supernatural intertwines with reality and the courage of the brave is tested. In a small coastal town, far removed from modernity, there is an old lighthouse, abandoned and solitary, that stands as a silent sentinel of the sea. Every night, when darkness envelopes everything, ghostly children appear near the lighthouse. Their childish laughter and translucent figures are visible to those who dare to look. The villagers have warned visitors for years not to approach the lighthouse after nightfall. They say that these children, whose eyes reflect the moonlight in a disturbing way, lure the unwary to an unknown fate from which they never return. The story begins with Marco, a young paranormal investigator who decides to visit the town to document the appearance of the children of the lighthouse. Marco did not believe in ghosts, but the persistence of the stories and the recent disappearances in the area led him to want to unravel the mystery. Upon arriving in the town, he was greeted with cautious looks and constant warnings not to approach the lighthouse. But Marco's curiosity was unyielding. One night, equipped with his camera and recorder, Marco approached the lighthouse. As he got closer, he began to hear soft laughter that seemed to come from all directions. With each step, the laughter intensified, and his heart beat faster. Suddenly, he saw a small child, ghostly in appearance, standing a few meters away. The child raised his hand and pointed toward the sea, where a dense fog was beginning to form. Marco felt a chill run down his spine, but forced himself to follow the child. As he ventured into the fog, Marco found himself in a place he did not recognize. He was no longer near the lighthouse, but on an unknown beach, illuminated by a pale bluish light. The children were there, looking at him with a mixture of sadness and curiosity. Suddenly, they began to whisper their story, a tragic tale of shipwrecks and lost lives. They recounted how, long ago, they were victims of a terrible accident at sea. Their spirits, unable to rest, were trapped in the lighthouse, seeking company to avoid being alone in their eternal condemnation. Marco, moved by the children's story, decided to help them. He spent weeks researching ancient shipwreck records and contacting descendants of the victims. Little by little, he unraveled the truth. A greedy captain had led his ship into a storm, ignoring the lighthouse keeper's warnings, in search of a lost treasure. The ship never reached its destination, and the children's souls were trapped, unable to find peace. One night, Marco returned to the lighthouse with the documents and evidence he had gathered. With them in hand, he summoned the children's spirits. He showed them how their families had remembered and honored them, and how the truth of their tragic death had finally been revealed. The children, upon hearing this, began to slowly fade away, their faces relieved and their laughter filled with joy for the first time. The lighthouse, which had been a place of terror, became a site of memory and reconciliation. The villagers, seeing that the apparitions had ceased, began to care for the lighthouse, leaving it as a reminder of the power of truth and peace. Marco, for his part, documented the entire experience and shared it, not as a horror story, but as a tale of redemption and relief. But the story doesn't end here. Marco, fascinated by what he had discovered, decided to continue his research in other places with similar paranormal phenomena. He became a renowned investigator, known for his empathetic approach and ability to solve mysteries that others deemed impossible. He often reflected on his experience at the lighthouse, remembering the children and the lesson they had taught him about the power of truth and memory. Years later, the coastal town had become a prosperous and tourist destination, largely thanks to the story of the lighthouse. Visitors flocked to hear the legend of the children and explore the restored lighthouse. The villagers proudly shared the story of how Marco had freed the trapped spirits and transformed the lighthouse into a symbol of hope. One night, during a particularly strong storm, A group of tourists decided to defy the warnings and explore the lighthouse. Among them was a young skeptic named Javier, who did not believe in ghosts or legends. As the storm intensified, the group found themselves trapped in the lighthouse, their nervous laughter mixing with the roar of the wind and the waves. Suddenly, the lights began to flicker, and children's laughter was heard in the distance. Javier, intrigued, decided to investigate while the others huddled inside the lighthouse. Upon exiting, he saw a ghostly child staring at him before disappearing into the fog. Without thinking twice, Javier followed him, finding himself on the same unknown beach where Marco had been years before. The children were there, whispers of sadness filling the air. This time, however, the whispers were not from the shipwreck victims, but from those who had gotten lost seeking the truth. Unknowingly, Javier had been lured to the same fate as those before him. But unlike Marco, he did not have the knowledge or empathy to understand and release the trapped spirits. Javier's story became a new warning for the town. The villagers reinforced the warnings about not approaching the lighthouse during storms, and the story of the young skeptic who got lost in the fog was added to the legend of the children of the lighthouse. The lighthouse, now a place of remembrance and respect, remained a reminder of the power of stories and the importance of honoring the memory of those who have passed. As time went on, Marco's story became something of a legend itself, told alongside the tale of the ghostly children. His efforts to free the spirits and bring peace to the restless souls were admired and respected. He had given the children the release they needed, and in doing so, he had brought a sense of closure to the entire town. But he couldn't shake the feeling that there were more stories out there, more restless spirits in need of help. Years later, Marco received a mysterious letter inviting him to investigate another haunted location far from the coast. Intrigued, he packed his bags and set out once more, determined to bring peace to those who were suffering. His journey took him to an old, abandoned mansion in the heart of the countryside, where the ghostly inhabitants had been disturbing the local villagers for generations. Upon his arrival, Marco met with the village elders, who shared the mansion's dark history. It had once belonged to a wealthy family who had vanished under mysterious circumstances, leaving their home to decay. The villagers reported seeing ghostly figures in the windows, hearing strange noises at night, and feeling an overwhelming sense of dread whenever they passed by the property. Determined to uncover the truth, Marco began his investigation. He spent days exploring the mansion, recording his findings and documenting the paranormal activity. The spirits he encountered were different from those at the lighthouse. They were angry and vengeful, lashing out at anyone who dared to enter their domain. As Marco delved deeper into the mansion's history, he discovered a series of hidden rooms and secret passages that revealed the family's tragic fate. They had been betrayed by a trusted friend who had locked them inside the mansion and left them to die. Their spirits, consumed by anger and betrayal, had been trapped ever since. With this new knowledge, Marco set out to free the spirits and bring them the peace they deserved. He performed a ritual to release the negative energy that had been binding them to the mansion, and one by one, the ghostly figures began to disappear. As the last spirit faded away, Marco felt a sense of relief wash over him. He had once again succeeded in bringing closure to those who had suffered. The villagers, grateful for Marco's help, began to restore the mansion, turning it into a place of remembrance and reflection. They honored the memory of the family who had once lived there and shared their story with future generations. Marco's reputation as a paranormal investigator continued to grow, and he was invited to investigate haunted locations all over the world. Through his work, Marco had learned that the key to solving these mysteries was empathy and understanding. By connecting with the spirits and uncovering their stories, he could help them find the peace they so desperately needed. And as he continued his journey, he knew that there would always be more tales to uncover, more restless souls to set free. And so, dear viewers, ends this extended tale of the children of the lighthouse and the new adventures that followed. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more narratives that challenge your imagination and make you question reality, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and let us know what you thought of this story in the comments. Until next time,